when reading this script, I was like, oh, okay, this is some good shit. But I love how at the end, we kind of think like, oh, this white boy won, because I feel like when movies or like scripts give us these powerful characters, there's always something that happens that takes it all away. And I love that, like, we thought that for a minute, but then it was like, oh no, bitch, I'm not stupid. I'm black, I'm magical, and I'm royalty, and I'm 2 steps ahead of you. That's what I love.
I love the feel of this. So like future, but like aristocratic. It's like super dope. It's and the visual that I have is what I hope the black future looks like. So this was, and it gave me that visual pretty easy. All the characters. It's not like typical in a script with like look at our large ensemble cast that you like want everyone to come back, but I was like waiting for everyone to come back. I was like, that was great.
I think it's also great to see queer folks specifically. I know my character is supposed to be non-binary, so like queer non-binary folks of color, black queer non-binary folks in positions of power. I think that's really, really necessary. A very necessary representation for sure.
I love that this production, there's a lot to play with. I love that there's layers, and I've heard this play read 3 times, I think. So it's really cool to see different actors work with the different layers. There's humor, there's anger, there's the saying, we want equality, not revenge, and how that term or how that quote is, how it manifests throughout the entire play.
I also love that we get to see 2 like queer people have sex, or like make love, because I feel like when it comes to queer sex on television and on stage, we kind of just have to assume that they are fucking, like we assume that they are having sex with each other, but we never like see intimacy between, and then like also not even just the sex, but like the intimate moments that we share together, where we get to like peel back and be like, you know what, I need you here, and like, this relationship is more than just everything that we present, but also like I need you here for support.
I remember reading this a few months back, and I remember finishing it being read, and I was like, I really want to hear it aloud. There are those plays where I'm like, I just want to hear the words being spoken. And I love your use of those quotes. It's sort of like, is this like heartbeat that sort of just continues to come back and continues to get louder. And I really love how you use that.
I was just gonna say, I also love how deep the plan is. Like the fact that Yancey has been babysitting Gabriel the whole time. like when like that is so, it was like, oh, like both Adhana and Yancey were able to slip into these like roles like so effortlessly to like make the plan happen. And that through line, like that like detail was just like hilarious to me. It was like, I go back, okay. I've been saying nigga for 3 days. Like,
yeah, Gabriel, as much as I love him, he would not have kept it a secret. He would have definitely opened his mouth. So he was not to be trusted with this information at all. Just all fell apart.
Yeah, Gabriel seemed like he'd get mad and be like, that's why we about to kill all y'all anyway.
Yes, pretty much. Yes, pretty much.
I also love Gabriel and Yancey's like banter.
Mm-hmm.
But also on the quotes that you had, like before even the MLK quote, like when I first was reading through it, it really just felt like it existed in the world of 2045 or whatever year we're in. And so did a lot of the other ones. They felt like they existed right in the like futuristic world. And then juxtaposing that with like, no, this was whenever that quote was originally stated was also pretty powerful.
This play mostly came about through like just conversations and experiences that I had. And I was very, very intrigued by, because like slavery is like the big thing. It's like the thing that is kind of so central to everything that we talk about, and like everything relates back to slavery. And I think so often people don't fully understand what slavery was. I think a lot of people really focus on the physical work of slavery and don't understand how there was so much trauma, so much of the mentality and the culture and the atmosphere that surrounded slavery that affected Black people and white people, because there's also a culture of white people in slavery, of how they treated us, how they saw us, and how they normalized the abuse to us. And so that was super intriguing to me. And I really wanted to comment that it wasn't just physical, that it was mental, it was emotional, it was spiritual, and it was something that lasted on and on and on, because we carry that just the same way we carry genes, we carry the trauma, we carry all of that, and we pass it on to people. But I wasn't personally interested in exploring that on Black bodies, because so often we are told to do the emotional work and the trauma work, and we have to so often put our trauma on stage for other people. And so while I was very interested in this topic and very interested in the subject, I wasn't interested in putting that weight on Black people. So I came up with this idea. And while writing it, it was very liberating because I wrote this, like, I want to say I started this like 2 years ago. And it was very interesting how much I would write. And in the back of my head, I'd be like, ooh, will white people like this? Or ooh, will white people understand this? Or ooh, like, I'm so going to alienate white people if I put this in here. And I had to so often tell myself, it's not for them. It's not even for Black people, it's for me. And I want to, and I just like had, it was such a weird trigger that I was like, I thought I had escaped the white gaze, or I thought I was above this, or I thought I was truly writing something so unapologetic, but I kept finding myself asking this question of how will white people perceive this? How will they take this? Will this turn people off? And so it was very liberating to actively turn that off in my brain, and it just like unlocked this thing in myself and in my writing that like this play wouldn't be what it was if I didn't actively make that conscious effort to be like, I can't think about that. If I alienate certain white people, then that's fine. This is my work, this is my art, and I need to make it how I make it. And I remember like when I was finished, I was like, this will probably never get produced, but I did it and I wanted to do it. And in that, I am proud of myself. So that's kind of how a lot of this came about. And I just want to make people laugh. I feel like so Black people just don't, like Black people, queer people, just so many marginalized people don't get enough range. They don't get enough time to be fun or to be sensual or to do anything that is not like the 3 or 4 stereotypical trauma tropes.
Normally, as a Black person in these shows, you kind of get used to being the butt of the joke. And I love that in this work, we are not the butt of the joke unless it's intracommunal and we just talking shit about each other, you know?
Yeah, that was something, because like with the Gabriel Yancey, Gabriel Adhana, like I really, and even a lot of the Regina Tamir that, and that is so cultural to us. And I remember there was a play club that read my play, and it was like I was the only Black person in the play club, and I was kind of only there to like kind of answer questions and facilitate. And I remember one of the people was like, I didn't find this play funny at all. Like I didn't enjoy it, and I just couldn't because like I don't like anything that like is harmful or being mean or rude to like other people. And I was like, but you love 12 Years a Slave. You love The Help. It's really weird that you are very
you love
easily,
Game of Thrones.
you
With
love,
all
I'm like,
like,
it's just, I was like, it's just weird to me that when it's Black trauma or Black violence, you praise it, you love it, you can't get enough of it. But this, and I was like, also like, no one's ever really physically harmed. Like there's nothing. So I was like, it's very, very interesting to me for you to say that when you will praise Black trauma, you can't get enough of Black violence. But here, people who look like you are the victims, and you're very, very uncomfortable. And now there's like this universal rule, and he like was very taken aback. I was like, I'm not trying to come for you, but it's just I just find that interesting.
Also, if anyone, you basically have to not watch any type of entertainment, because there's a lot of entertainment where people are willing to harm other people in order to get what they want.
The whole industry of comedy is like on the backs of like queer people, Black women, fat people, like disabled people. Like they're literally, if you strip away these comedians and you take away all their jokes about gay people, all their transphobic jokes, all their jokes about dark-skinned people, Black women, you take away all their disabled jokes, they have like no fucking lineup.
Yes, it's awesome for people to make fun of white people for an hour and a half. Like definitely not enough of that in the media. But also what I think is really smart about what the piece that you have is that you are also making fun of like many Black stereotypes. Like we have presidents that are smoking blunts. We have, like all of the like Gabriel obsessed with his body image or whatever. So like you make fun of all of the characters in a way that a sitcom needs to. Like we love and appreciate the Black and the white characters. I just think that's really important so that all of your audience members of, whether they're white or Black are going to like a play that strictly made fun of the white characters but didn't have any Black stereotypes or didn't have any comedy. For those would be really painful to watch, I think. But you do a good job of balancing the comedy.
I'm not white. I wanted to first say, always thank you for inviting me. I really enjoy what you have going on here, and I'm always excited to see more of what you have. Actors, phenomenal job. I understand that I'm saying that because I came late. I'm sorry. So I know that there are some things that I definitely missed at the beginning in terms of like setting up this world. What I will say, kind of answering to your question about like, I would say like uncomfortability was, again, I'm coming in later, so I'm trying to like play catch up. Is I think even just hearing the word slavery over and over and over again, and realizing. It's interesting. I think it's like whenever I hear the word slavery, it's typically coming from white people. And in this, I was hearing it from Black people, and they were applying this to white people. And I was trying to kind of figure out my feelings about that there's just always an emotional weight kind of just hearing that word, but hearing it in the way that you set it up in this world from Black people, I was like, oh, this is this fictional, futuristic world. And it's still just like, And I see you playing with this comedy to try to like bring it back up. But I'll be honest, it was like kind of hard to like let the laugh pick me up because I was like, damn. And it's like even the phrase that you guys had where it was like, it's not about revenge, it's getting even. And I was like, but it's not. It's horrible. I was like, this is horrible. But yeah, it was just like, I think for me, it was kind of like hard sometimes to allow the joke to kind of pull me out of like, damn, this is like, this is horrible. Because you're seeing how these people are on both sides, like, this isn't good for anybody. This isn't good for anybody.
You know, I think it's super interesting about that point is, and you might be saying, so it's your character. Like, Regina's struggle with like, how is it possible that we are winning, that we are on top of the joke, that this should be funny, and we're still doing the work, and it's still hard, like, and still almost not funny, and still feels like we're doing the work. Like that's so interesting to me.
And another thing that's interesting to me, to your point, I'm sorry, how do we pronounce your name?
Jenica.
Jenica. Okay. So another thing that's interests me about your point, Jenica, is like, yes, I love how we are programmed to think anything that happens to white people is just so horrible. Because I think as a society, we're conditioned to see things happen to Black people and be like, oh damn, that's just how it is, you know. But in this play, where like that, and not saying like you meant it any type of way, but like I mean, it was horrible, but I think it's interesting to me that like some audience members will inevitably extend sympathy to the two white slaves in ways that Black people never have and never will experience empathy, you know. And I also think that it's interesting that in a play where, you know, because when we talk about slave narratives as it relates to Black people, the rod is never spared. We watch Black people get beaten. We watch Black people get raped. We watch Black people get killed, lynched, all of that. And in a play where none of that happens to these white people and we still have audience members feeling horrible for them, that is a statement in itself. And that is something that needs to be like, you know, investigated, you know, just as a society and how we've been conditioned to automatically extend sympathy to white people, regardless of what happened. Because also it's said in the text that this is a treatise that they signed. They said, yes, we want this. So they volunteered to do it. And now we feel bad because it's harder than they thought it was going to be, you know? That's interesting to me.
And I also think like someone's excuse for feeling that, I think, as like a viewer would be like, but that was so long ago.
Right.
As if like time makes the atrocities of slavery any more acceptable.
When literally it was ingrained in their DNA, and we as descendants of slaves have inherited trauma, literally, as is like facts. If you look it up, we inherit trauma from our ancestors who were slaves because the atrocities of slavery ingrained itself into their DNA, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's why that moment with Tamir and Regina was very important to me. That like, again, I think even now what's happening now is we're seeing a lot of Black people getting elevated to positions of power, but that doesn't immediately fix the problem. That doesn't, because it puts a lot more emotional weight on us, more, especially because we're like, we still have this mentality of I have to do this perfectly or no one else is going to get this. I have, like, no matter what, I am the spokesperson for all of us. If I don't do this right, they're going to think none of us do this right. It's this weird double-edged sword. It's like, yes, we want the power. Yes, we want the responsibility. Yes, we want the autonomy. But how much that also still costs us.
I think it also uplifts the very real fact that you can do everything right and it still not be enough.
I think there's like 3 scenes where you tackle like the N-word. First of all, I like that you said after each of the little audiobook things, like, you cannot say nigga. I was like, let's ride this home. Because obviously it still needs to be talked about. But I liked the scene where we were trying to trick her, like, to see if she would say it. That was very fun. And then there was another one. But then I think the third one for me, the third like nigga scene, was like, it was too much for me personally. When I think it might have been Yancey and Gabriel. I don't know if it was the length of the scene or just like that it was happening again. I think that one was like, I hit my nigga limit.
So actually, that's one of the reasons that I wanted to take myself put myself on video. That's one of the things that I wanted to actually talk a little bit about as well. So hi everybody, Derek, he, him. So again, Ben, just appreciate you putting all of these on. It's been a fantastic month hanging out with you. So that's been cool, thanks. But yeah, to go to the N-word thing, for me, the first couple of times felt wrong. I kind of have the opposite perspective. The first couple of times felt wrong to me because I felt like you were making light of it. And that to me felt wrong and different. And then during the third scene with it, you know, trying to come up with a word, right, for the white people, felt a little weird. But then after that, and you went on your tirade about what it actually means and the weight that it carries, like that's sort of what hit me. And I was like, okay, I'm okay with you, you know, kind of trying to make light of it and sort of build it up to this thing, so that now when I actually hear, you know, that kind of speech about it, it hit me a lot harder than I think it would have had those first couple of scenes not been there. The other thing that I would say, going back to Danyelle's initial comment about Black queer people in power, I loved the presidential speech when the terrorist attack was going to come, and how it was all about peace and love. I just thought that was great. Hearing that from a Black queer person in power, that, you know, this is how we're ruling this world now, right? Go out with peace and love and be safe.
Yeah, I think it was important to me to show that like we are different. We've been programmed to be different in a way that like, because they're like, we listen to them, because, you know, even in power, they're like, we are still going to listen. We are not like going to be like, I'm the rulers and that's period, you know. So I think it was important to me, because I do feel very strongly that we would be in charge very differently. We wouldn't engage in things the same way it's been. So it was very important to me to show that difference, to be like, we're not just gonna roll over, like take care of yourselves, but like let's actually, because that was something I thought about a lot, is like, do we actually want equality, or do we just want to switch places? Because there are some people that they just want to switch places because they get in power and then they do the exact same things, like the exact same things, and that's something that has very much frustrated me. And they do it under the gaze of, we want equality, we like, you know, and I'm like, no, but you can't like, you know, it's wrong on both sides if you're getting into power and then doing the exact same damaging things into your own people. And I've seen that a lot, and so I think it was very important to me to just really create a world. I'm like, this is more how I think we would if we got that opportunity, especially like Black queer people who have, you know, the oppression of being queer and Black, and like, you know, especially when we're like being queer, it's like being queer and Black, we get the oppression on both ends of it, because, you know, the Black community is very, very toxic sometimes when it comes to being queer, especially when it comes to being, you know, trans and non-binary and like a lot of stuff like that. So that was very important to me.
But I did have a question about like how you chose the royals, because even like when I imagine like Black queer people in power, I'm like a collective. So like, how did you choose that specific?
I think I was just playing off the idea that we call each other king, queen, and blah blah blah. But I think even though they're called royals, you do see that they don't entirely function as royals, where it's end all be all. That they do communicate with other leaders. They do, you know, live in community with each other. So even though they're called royals, I still don't think like they function in that way. But yeah, I think I just really wanted to play on the part of that's what we call each other. We call each other king and queen and stuff like that. So that even though we are called royalty, and even though like it's not like people are like Queen Tamir and Queen Regina, that's just like, yeah, that's what we call each other. But like, yeah, I guess I wanted that term, but also wanted to show that it still functions differently.
I also loved the repetition. Well, I had to get used to it, but once I got used to it, I was like, yeah, I love that. I love the repetition of the word white, and that they are reminded that they are white, because I think that there was no shortage of reminders to Black people that we were Black, you know?
I did. I think I struggled a lot with how to most accurately parallel the traumas of slavery, or parallel, and like that was one of them. That was like, there was just like, or even like the scene with Yancey, Whitney, and Gabriel convincing her that 6 months had gone by when it only been a few weeks. So there's like, there are things like with religion, how they use religion to convince Black people to stay in their place and keep them in line and not. So there were things I was like, how do I show this, or how do I parallel this? Because even like I was like, because it took me so long to figure out to use the pills and the box, because I was like, I don't want to show violence. I really, really don't. But
yeah,
it's
I'm
very
interested
important
in your
to me.
decision for that. I'm intrigued by it.
Yeah, so I mean, because for me, I was very, very intrigued and very adamant. I was like, I don't want this to be a show where people only focus on the physical. I really, really wanted to talk about the mental and the emotional and the ingraining certain things into people that was involved in slavery. So I was like, I don't want a ton of violence. I don't, because even like the most graphic things happen off stage.
Yeah.
So I think it was very important, because like I don't want people to get distracted and think that like it's just about the violence, because it's not. It's just like the same way people, when they think about slavery, like, yeah, you worked in the fields and it was hard and you got whipped. I'm like, yes, but also you took away our religion, you took away our identity, you took away our names, our families, like there was emotional, and so I think that was also why I did the little audio tapes, because it was such a, we are going to retrain you how to live in this society. So I was like, so some of those devices came into play in that way. But I think overall, I was like, I don't want to ignore that physical abuse happened during slavery, but I just don't want that to be the main focus, because that always tends to be the main focus when we talk about slavery. And I'm like, that minimalizes slavery so much,
Yeah.
and that frustrates me.
You're right. You're right. I just wanted to see one of them get their ass whooped. That's just me.
Yes, I was like very adamant about none of them ever physically getting
Okay,
hit in real life.
I'm sorry, Jeff. 1 second. So like with the dreams and like everything that happened in the stage directions, how like what would be your vision for that happening?
In my vision, I'm hoping that will be changed with like lighting, so that the lighting you'll
Or
understand
like a silhouette type thing.
yeah, you like a silhouette or just some type of lighting trick that you'll know like these are dream sequences. These are not really physically happening.
That's fire.
Yes. And I need to be better about like actually describing things. I'm just like, oh, they'll figure it out when they get it. Like I'm a really rude and selfish.
That's the beauty of theater. That's
and I'll just be like, they'll figure it out. I'll be like, and then this happens. Yeah, I'll just like, and then this happens. It's a dream. You'll get it. You'll figure it out. You're smart. Go for it.
All of this actually leads into another like prompt, I guess, for Ben to kind of talk about and explain. So right before we read the play, you decided to cut a stage direction at the very end of the play. Do you want to open the floor for that?
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. So the play was supposed to end where Whitey wakes up and he realizes everything that had happened to him was a dream. And then you hear Whitney say, you know, it's something like, what's wrong? But I was like, I don't want, at the last minute, I thought about it and I kind of felt like, I don't want people to escape. I don't want people to have that breath of release of like, oh, it was all a dream. It's fine. So at the last minute, I did change it. And so I guess I am curious if anyone would have felt differently or felt like it would have been more effective or less effective if you, at the very end, had this realization that none of this actually happened to them.
That's an interesting question to me because none of it did happen to them. So I think like if he were to wake up at the end, like I don't know if I would have feel let down or because this I said today reading this again was like almost a little too much therapeutic for me. Just because I think that so often, and Ben touched on this earlier, like it is so acceptable in media to see trauma presented on anyone that is not a cis white man in the media. And even then it's like glorified and they're like, yeah, it's like the strangest thing. Our media is very strange. We should really talk about it. So like to have this piece that's just like unabashedly like, yes, that's what's happening in this world. Is this sounds so weird. It's so oddly refreshing. I like it's such an enjoyable play to me. And because this play has it has me in mind. But it also like does something that puts trauma on other people doesn't, and it humanizes the people that are being traumatized, which could be an issue of like I always see white folks as humans no matter what because I've been told that's what I'm supposed to do. But like in those moments where the brother and sister got to have conversations, like we got to see what we thought was a relationship performed between Adhana and Whitey by like this vulnerable, like we got to see what we thought we did. We got to see as much vulnerability out of that character we were ever gonna get. And I think that like so like this play did a good job of kind of like of just like I don't know, it checked all the boxes for me. Like I felt and like even in the moments that were like difficult, it was like wow, like but that was just a dream.
Yeah. And I think that I don't know if I would have been let down if I think that the stage direction that he wakes up could be up for interpretation because what does the audience assume? What parts of it were a dream? You know, like what was the entire battle? I don't think the entire battle should be a dream. I think that victory should very much so be like this happened. You feel me? But I feel like as it relates to like him just waking up, we could assume that like him thinking his sister was gone was a dream or like, you know, like, I don't know, like it would be like for me, what was the dream? Was it everything or was it parts?
Yeah, that could be confusing.
And also like, you know, Whitey and Whitey say that they don't sleep. So like, could this have been a hallucination? You know, like what could it have been? You feel me? So like, I don't know. I don't think it would have been a letdown for me if like he woke up from something because everybody would have a different interpretation of what was the dream and what was not, you know?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting interpretation because until you kind of mentioned that, right, until people start to have that conversation, I wouldn't have thought about it that way, right? I think, Ben, I think like you mentioned earlier, I think it would have been a way to let white people leave the theater and not really have a conversation, not really talk about it anymore, right? I think ending it the way that you did makes us sit with it longer. And, you know, I've mentioned this before, but I think one of the things that I love about theater is I think that theater should start a conversation. And I love to go to the bar afterwards and grab that cocktail, right, to have those conversations. And I think leaving it the way that you did kind of forces a little bit of that conversation more in my interpretation.
Cool, good to know.
Oh, sorry. Did you want to move on?
Oh, no, go ahead.
I agree with Derek and really everybody. I mean, I'm just one voice and there are 15 people on this call, but I think, and I originally watched this play as an audience member before I was in it, where you did keep the stage direction that it was a dream at the end. But having seen or at least experienced the two versions, I definitely think the stronger choice, and like just one video out of 15, definitely prefer taking the dream out of it. From a narrative point of view, I just don't think that you need it. And I'm going to say something that I don't know if this is like a goal of this production, but like because of the futuristic setting, because of the comedy, as a white person originally, as an audience member, now being in it, like I didn't feel too attacked, just because like the fantasy of the world that you've created is very clear. And that's bad in the sense that like some white people are gonna, I imagine some white people might leave and think, oh, well, this was a fantasy, I don't need to take anything too seriously. That of course is not good. The other side of that coin is like, because you've clearly because it's not, it creates enough of a buffer, like the fantasy and the comedy setting, so that some white people are actually going to hear the points that you're making. Like some white people, like if it was too direct, they wouldn't hear anything at all. I mean, I'm making assumptions. I'm extrapolating, what other white people are going to think or could think. But if it was too direct, like they're going to shut down and like, human nature, like confirmation bias and all that stuff. They're not going to hear what you're really trying to say about equality, what you're really trying to say about the N-word, what you're really trying to say about the emotional suffering of slavery. But because you've said it in this fantasy realm, people are able to process the message, right? It's a reason why like we can learn things from cartoons better than we can. Not that you created a cartoon, like that's not what I'm saying, but I hope that example is helpful in articulating like my point. So that being said, like having him wake up at the end of the play is kind of like you're double cartooning yourself, and I just don't think you need it, because I think you're walking that line really nicely from my point of view.
I think that point also goes along with what Nick has said, which is, for me, why I really don't feel bad for the Black people in this play, because we are acutely aware that none of this happens. That this is a world we created where like none of this happens. And like based off of, how we've been socialized, a lot of us don't even think that this is a possibility, So I think, now that you mentioned that, I agree.
And I'm also going to say another reason that I really like this piece is because I think I, as a person making things now, am very uninterested in assessing it by what white people will get from or want to leave the theater doing. I'm not interested anymore because I can't be. It's not my job. My job is to be an artist and to do the work that I like to do. And what I love about this piece is that I got to do that. Like I got to just like say the shit that was on the page because it was written for me to say it, and be like, and that's what I said. And it was funny, and I had a great time saying it. And now I'm gonna go.
It's so funny.
Yeah, I'm gonna go, and I'm gonna get high, and I'm gonna like watch something else funny, and I'm gonna go to bed. And I hope somebody has a conversation about something great tonight, sure. But also, whatever. I got to be super fucking Black.
Yes.
Like
I said what I said.
And I said what I said.
Yeah, I think,
and I had a wonderful time.
Yeah, I think this was I want to say, like one of the only plays that like I really was like, I genuinely don't care if anyone walks away with anything. I don't really want sure, there's definitely messages and definitely devices and definitely things that like
and the people that will get it absolutely will.
Yeah.
I think it's so ingrained and it's so smart that if you don't like, then you
I was like,
I
was like, you know what? Yeah, I was like, people. I think like I said, it's like a love letter to Black people. That I was like, I just want Black people to have a good time when they see this. Because especially a lot of the stuff we already know, we already talk about. So I'm like, and there is because I also like had a conversation about what is Black content and what is Black content for Black people. Like just because Black people are in it, does that make it Black content? Or just because Black people made this, does that? Because I will argue there's some stuff that I'm like, I didn't learn anything from this. I just felt more traumatized. And even though Black people are in this, or even though Black people made this, I don't feel like this was for me. I feel like this was like Black content for white people.
Yeah.
Where it's like, hey, let's teach white people about Black people, or hey, let's put trauma on stage to plead with white people to be nicer to us. And I'm like, that doesn't really interest me, and that isn't anything new to me. I don't learn anything. I don't walk away other than being like, well, yeah, I saw my trauma and now I get to go back home and live it. Great.
And you know what I love about this piece is I think, because I don't personally, and you know, I might be in the minority, but I don't personally subscribe to the idea that art has to teach me something. I think art can just be sometimes. And I love that this piece can just be what it is. You feel me? And like Nick said, like you said, the people who get it, got it. The people whose ears are open will hear something. And if you don't take nothing from it, at least you laughed.
Yeah, at least you had a funny scene about mac and cheese. Like,
period. With Brussels sprouts in it.
Because they do it. Yeah. That actually did. That was a real thing.
Yes.
Or the
cats.
So that came because my mom came home from work one day and she just looked really upset. And I was like, what's wrong? And she was like, you know, there's this white lady at work and my mom used to work at this like predominantly Black daycare. And she's like, hadn't really been getting along with a lot of the coworkers. So like she came in one day and like brought in some lasagna to share with all of us. And no one ate any of it because every day for work, she would come in like sweaters and stuff like that and just be covered in cat hair. And my mom was like, you know, I tried to be nice and I got a piece and there was cat hair. And
sorry.
I had to, like, she's like, I didn't finish it. I just like wrapped it up. She's like, I wrapped it up because I didn't want her to see me throw it in the garbage. Like I wrapped it up and I waited till I got home and I threw it out. And I was like, yeah. Yeah, a lot of the
like
material.
The little memes of like a kitten inside of a crock pot, and it's like, oh, he's so cute. Look at him. Why the fuck is he in your crock pot?
So yeah, a lot of these stories and a lot of these things are rich. Like I feel like so much of this material came from like actual experiences, actual stories, actual conversations. Because the moment where like Yancy and Gabriel are like trying to find a word for white meat was like a real thing that me and my roommate, we had discussion. We're like, man, because literally like people are still debating the N-word. Like they're still debating the N-word. And so that was a conversation that I had with my roommate where I was like, man, like, I don't understand why people can't just understand that, like, don't say it. Cause it like, it's a really, you know, and so that whole scene kind of came from me and my roommate, like, is there a word that is equivalent to that for white people? And we were like literally sitting in his car, just like going over words and be like, is there something equivalent? Is there something, is there like, and we were like, no, there's really no word that we could think of that comes close. There really isn't. And even a word that comes close to the history of that word. And then I was like, man, I need to write this in here. So yeah, I think so much was just like,
and it's fucked up that all people, like I feel like all people of color have a word, and white people just get to be. You know?
Yeah. So a lot of this kind of wrote itself where I'm like, yeah, these are all like experiences or conversations or just collective thoughts that I've had, and I was like, how can I, yeah. And I think even like halfway through, I was writing, just like all these, and I was like, who cares if there's no storyline? I'm just writing. There's this scene, there's this thing I want to talk about, and there's this, and I was like, oh shit, I should like maybe have a plot, maybe. And I was like, sure, let's do this like little Y2K thing. Yeah, it was quite a process writing this, where like so much of it just came naturally, and other things really rattled my mind and rattled my brain, and like, yeah, it was very liberating, very freeing. And yeah, but I was so nervous. I was like, I was so ready for people to be like, no, this ain't it, or like, I still am not convinced that any theater will ever produce this show. But I did it. I wrote it, and I'm proud of it.
So. I asked you about producing it 2 days ago.
Look, until opening night, I'm not convinced. Until closing night, I'm not convinced. Because they can still pull it mid-run. Until closing night, until my stipend hits that direct deposit, I can't believe it. I will not.